Welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to tell you a story that starts with an older man driving a truck who stopped by a young cop on a highway. They said he was speeding and endangering traffic. They scolded him for being too old, too frail to drive at night. They lectured him. They recorded it. They mocked him. No one knew. He was chasing an SUV where his granddaughter had just been kidnapped. So, sit down, relax your shoulders, pour yourself a hot tea, and join me on this journey. Late afternoon, on Interstate 35, cutting through Denton, Texas, the sun cast golden streaks, gliding like a thin blade across truck hoods, leaving slow-falling trails of orange fire in the air. Cars trailed each other, growling like a herd of steel beasts, but standing out in the flow, a silver-gray freightliner crossing the median, pushing near 90 miles an hour and not swerving. But clearly, something was burning inside. In the cab, a man, about 63, gray hair cropped close, forehead deeply lined, his eyes narrowed, focused, and counted every second. His hands gripped the wheel, steady, unshaking like someone who'd once guided 10-ton machines through fields of gunfire. Everything inside was arranged like a barracks. A small black and white photo taped beside the wheel. A blonde girl with messy hair hugging a shaggy dog, grinning carefree on a front porch. Below it, a handwritten note. Sarah, 3:30, Westfield School. The dashboard clock read 4:27. Almost an hour gone on the windshield. A faded silver tag hung from an old paracord, 3 faint letters, A, F, S, O, C, beneath, a small American flag, edges frayed. Each item is old, but spotless, kept as if they were bone, blood, memory, and honor of a lifetime. A siren wail sliced the air. Red and blue lights flashed behind. A Texas State Patrol car surged forward, signaling to pull over. The man didn't argue, didn't hesitate. Signaled right, changed lanes, stopped. The truck eased to a halt like an old beast, still proud, though weary. A young officer stepped out, athletic build, sunglasses, cold eyes, glancing at a license plate scanner as he approached. He stopped. The cab door opened. The man stepped down, stood straight, no hand on the frame, no bracing his knees. The officer looked surprised but kept his tone sharp. "Do you know how fast you were going 89 miles an hour? Limit here's 70. The man didn't answer, just looked. Silent. The officer's face hardened. A rig this heavy, tearing down the interstate. What do you think's waiting at the end of that road? In that moment, the man spoke, his voice low, gravelly, unhurried. If I stop, she won't be alive. The officer froze, eyes narrowed. She. Are you threatening me? This isn't an action movie, Grandpa. A few cars behind slowed. People started filming. An older man stopped by a cop a story. Too ordinary for anyone to think deeper. The man didn't explain, didn't react. Just lowered his head slightly, then turned back to the cab. The fading sun caught his hand. A glint, the silver tag shimmered. The officer glanced at it, his eyes twitched. Half sock, he might not know exactly, but instinct whispered, this wasn't just anyone. Still, youthful pride pushed him to write the ticket. I don't care about your reasons. Law's the law. Next time you're caught, I'm impounding this truck. No reply. The cab door shut, the engine roared, the freightliner merged back into traffic, like it never stopped. But inside, his eyes didn't soften, they sharpened, colder, as if every emotion had frozen. A phone buzzed in his chest pocket. No caller ID. He answered. A low, distorted voice, warped by an electronic filter. Sarah is a good kid. Don't call the cops. If you want her alive, you know what to do. The call ended. No negotiation, no warning, just silence, and a heartbeat sinking, like a thin blade pressed to the man's heart. He didn't shout. Didn't slam the wheel, didn't rage. He just opened the glove compartment, pulled out an old military map. Red marks dotted it. Hand-drawn lines connected them, delivery routes, warehouses, and an empty lot west of Gainesville. He studied the map, 2 seconds, then signaled, took the next highway exit. The truck changed course. The sky turned purple. Streetlights flickered on one by one, like the breath of a city falling asleep. But tonight, he wouldn't sleep, couldn't. Because this time, it wasn't just a child. It was something dormant for 20 years, slowly waking. Gainesville at night held nothing special. A small, quiet town in North Texas, about an hour's drive from the Oklahoma border. Old brick buildings. A few bars were still lit. A 24-hour gas station glows faintly. The farm supply store has been shuttered since the afternoon, but in a corner of an abandoned warehouse, far from the town center, something didn't belong in this place's calm. A black SUV was parked backward in the shadows, no front plate. Headlights cut straight into the warehouse's west side door. A large man dragged out an industrial cooler, pushed it inside. The door slammed shut. Nothing more. Just crickets and wind rattling rusty tin roofs. A few miles away, the silver-gray Freightliner stopped under the shade of a large tree near the gas station. Buck killed the lights, opened the compartment by the passenger seat. He pulled out a leather-bound notebook. Edges worn, steeped in road dust. The first pages held maps, delivery orders, and codes, and names, crossed out, and crossed out. A page near the end had an old black-and-white photo taped in 3 men standing before a dust-caked Humvee. Buck in the middle, to his left, a young man with long hair, grinning like war couldn't touch him. To his right, Douglas Kincaid, Buck's old commander, back in their AFSOC days. U.S. Air Force Special Operations Command. Buck flipped a few more pages. An envelope slipped out. Old military issue, sealed, on it. Familiar handwriting from Kyle, his teammate who died in Helmand. The letter remained unopened. Buck kept it like an unfulfilled promise, an unforgiven secret. His hand trembled slightly as he read, "If you're reading this, I'm not alive, and the truth can't stay buried forever." He stared at it, didn't open it, not tonight. If he survived tonight, he'd read it. If not, it would be buried with him, like the things he carried out of the air. Silent. He leaned back in the seat. His fingers brushed the silver cord holding his military tag, not just a keepsake. It was the only proof of when he was ordered not to exist. For years, he'd lived as if that past were a dream of gunpowder, coded signals crackling at night, and choices no one wanted to recall. But tonight, that dream was waking. Every reflex, every breath, every glance at a map, every trick to unlock a hidden case, all came back. Buck powered on an old phone, activating a recording app that only old Spec Ops soldiers knew still worked. He clipped a mini recorder to the dashboard, set a magnetic camera on the truck's roof, aimed at the abandoned warehouse under the floorboard, a hidden compartment. He opened it, pulled out a coil of rope, a folding knife, an old toolkit, not new, but clean, maintained, and never failed him. His hands moved fast, precise, with no hesitation, as if he'd never left, as if his body still remembered every motion. To outsiders, Buck was a stubborn older man, living off freight hauls, eating canned food, and avoiding people. But no one knew. He'd once had the right to live and kill in places maps hadn't named. Buck had driven through Hellman's hell in a mission called Fire Lizard. When pressure mines and rockets ambushed the convoy, he was the only survivor, not luck. But because he'd driven 16 hours straight through desert and gunfire, never veering an inch. After that, they called him Ghost Mule, the mule no one saw, carrying the world on its back. The war ended. The nickname faded. He left the military in silence. No medals, no applause, just an AFSOC tag and a quiet send-off from his old commander, Douglas Kincaid, the same man who'd ordered the convoy abandoned for acceptable strategic losses. Buck didn't return to civilian life. He chose trucking short hauls at first. There are long runs from Texas to Oregon, Florida to Montana. No remarriage after his wife's death. No drinking, no friends, just the truck. And Sarah. The blonde girl was the last one left. Daughter of the son he lost in a helicopter training crash, Sarah was the only reason he kept going. No one saw the light at day's end. But to him, the whole world. And now, that world was being dragged into the dark. A place too deep for him to wait for someone else to save. He had to go, not as a grandfather, but as a man who'd walked through hell and come back. Buck took a deep breath. The GPS showed the warehouse coordinates west of Gainesville, one of the 3 suspicious sites he'd tracked for 3 weeks. Unreported delivery routes, odd hours, things police hadn't noticed, but he didn't because he didn't see with a civilian's eyes, but a soldier's, one who'd survived where no one else had. He started the engine. The Freightliner's rumble steadied. The road ahead was pitch black, but in Buck's heart, everything was clear. The feeling of driving through gunfire was returning. Like that last time in Helmand, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but to keep a promise. No one gets left behind, ever. The night seeped into the town like colorless fog. Yellow light from abandoned signs stretched across the road, dragging jagged shadows like torn memories. On a side road west of Gainesville, the silver-gray Freightliner rolled on, not rushed, but never stopping. In the passenger seat, Buck activated a personal GPS receiver, an old AFSOC relic, with no internet and no outbound signal. One function tracking coordinates from a device he'd planted on the black SUV 2 days ago. The signal held, still moving, still alive. Sarah, a tiny dot on the pale green screen, was now his entire world. Buck had noticed that SUV at a truck stop south of Denton. 3 men, silent as ghosts, trailing Sarah from a distance. No proof, no names, but their eyes, cold, unblinking, like those he'd seen behind dirt mounds in Hellman's nights. Old instincts didn't die, and when Sarah vanished this afternoon, he knew. Those instincts were still correct. He stopped the truck less than half a mile from the Target warehouse. No streetlights, no checkpoints. A perfect place for things the world shouldn't see. He killed the headlights far back, leaving only faint red marker lights, dim as blood. Then he opened the compartment under the seat, pulling out a sonic scanner, basic, not perfectly accurate, but enough to distinguish footsteps from an AC unit. One sound source moved near the south wall. Another stayed still, maybe a guard or a motion sensor. To Buck, those weren't just data points. They were a map of life and death. In his mind, every step, every blind spot, every sliver of light, aligned like a tactical grid. A soldier's brain had woken. No time to hesitate, but no room for sloppiness. Buck opened an old phone with only calls and covert codes. He punched in a sequence. A mini-map appeared 3 warehouses with illegal transactions over the past 4 weeks. This was one. The other 2 were farther out. If Sarah were moved, there'd be no second chance. Wind from the field slid cold across his jacket, carrying the scent of rotting wood and old oil. Buck didn't feel fear, just cold. Not from the air, but from standing in more body-filled freezers than any doctor. His hand brushed the military tag's silver cord. then set it on the dash like a wordless prayer. He spoke, almost a whisper. "If tonight's the end, I choose to die doing right," then nodded. Not for anyone to see, but to make himself believe. He stepped out, carrying a tool bag rubber mallet, folding knife, bolt cutters, industrial tape, and a signal jammer, the kind used to block remote drone communications, illegal to own. But he'd kept a homemade version from his post-military days. He knew if they were pros, they wouldn't use standard phones, private networks, encrypted apps, custom radio frequencies. He had to cut their comms, just for 8 minutes, an eternity if used right. At the warehouse's side door, Buck heard metal clanking inside a soundproof door. But to ears that could pick out an AK's bolt in a desert wind, he knew. Someone was checking cargo, and not alone. He placed the jammer by the door's edge and activated it. The light blinked red, then green, flashing 3 times. Signal blocked, inside. Muffled radio chatter faded, then died. They were cut off. For him, those 8 minutes were everything. Buck used the bolt cutters to snap the lock, slipping inside. Pitch black. Only a white glow at the warehouse's far end. He moved fast, silently, under the light. An industrial cooler came into view. On its side, a dried blood streak ran from the floor to the rim. His heart clenched, but he didn't stop, didn't scream, just gripped the knife tighter. Each step pulled him back to the nightmare. Near the cooler, he heard breathing, faint, almost invisible, and a small hand, resting inside the open lid. Sarah. He didn't let tears fall. I just drew the knife and pried the lock. The lid popped. Sarah lay curled inside, skin pale, almost blue, eyes closed, but breathing, pulse faint. He stripped off his jacket and wrapped her in it, lifted her, retreated. But as he turned, shouts erupted from the warehouse. What the hell's going on? They'd noticed the signal loss. Buck ran, not like an older man, but his body had been rewired for one task: get the girl out safe. Sarah moaned softly. Eyes fluttered. He whispered, almost a breath, "Easy, I'm here, you're okay." In that moment, time slid back 20 years. He'd carried Kyle like this, blood soaking his chest, in Hellmand, but this time he wouldn't lose another. Buck reached the truck, started it. Headlights blazed. 2 men burst from the warehouse, freezing in the glare. They didn't have time to draw. The Freightliner roared like a wild beast, surged forward, forced them to dive aside. No one was crushed, but their world had just changed forever. In the cab, Buck didn't yell, didn't curse, just burned with eyes red as fire, brighter than any light out there. Tonight, a man without a weapon had returned to the battlefield, not to win, but to keep an old promise. No one gets left behind. Ever. On Highway 82, heading east toward Sherman, the silver-gray Freightliner slipped out of Gainesville under a thick veil of night. Wind whistled through the cracked window like breath from an old world clawing back. Sarah lay curled in a thermal blanket in the sleeper compartment behind the driver's seat, lips pale, but her breathing had steadied. Buck had just taken her to a small clinic on the outskirts of Whitesboro, run by an old doctor who owed him for sorting out paperwork 3 years back. No questions, no records, just an hour's favor. 1 hour to do what he knew he couldn't avoid, go back. Buck spread a map on the cab's fold-out table. The initial marks were no longer guesses. They'd formed a pattern, 3 warehouses, all tied to one security firm, Sentinel Logistics, a name that sounded legit unless you'd seen it in Iraq, when an entire village of kids vanished from the map, unreported. He was there. He knew. On a handwritten note, He'd jotted a code intercepted from radio chatter the previous night, listening closely. Buck caught an old encrypted signal. An AFSOC internal marker from 15 years ago, a code only a handful knew. One of them was Douglas Kincaid, once his commander, now the puppeteer. Buck knew Sarah wasn't the first victim, and he, a man presumed dead in a scrubbed mission, wasn't a random target. He didn't die, he was erased, like the last witness. They couldn't afford it. The next night, Buck returned to Gainesville, but not in the truck. He rented an old SUV, swapped for a temporary plate, and wore a local delivery driver's jacket. Cold Storage Logistics was scrawled on the cargo bay in a washable ink, mimicking a defunct company still running ghost rigs. The last time he'd disguised himself was at a supply checkpoint in Iraq, driving relief cargo through a fire zone without betraying his unit. Now, he did it again on American soil. 316 Etapaham. His SUV reached the gate of Warehouse 17, where the last signal pinged. The gate opened after he flashed a forged order number. The guard, a bald man, arms inked with tattoos, glanced, then waved him through, no questions, no checks. In the night hall world, silence was the unspoken rule. The less said, the longer you lived. Warehouse 17 was larger, soundproof metal, panoramic cameras, industrial cooling systems. The main door sealed the moment his SUV rolled inside. A man in a black suit and work boots stepped out from a control booth. No greeting, no smile, no inspection. Just one line, Zone 3, drop off. Out by 3:40. His voice mixed Dakota twang with Southern grit, the accent from operatives who'd changed names in war zones a dozen times. Buck nodded, drove deeper into the warehouse. Rows of small containers lined the path, unmarked. Each is locked with a unique digital code, untraceable by federal systems. He slowed, eyes scanning as if searching for the drop-off. In truth, he was memorizing codes, numbers, emergency exits, distances, camera blind spots. Every detail was survival. A side door swung open. A tanned, bald man with earbuds, holding a coffee mug, froze and stared at Buck. "You look familiar. You run the El Paso route." Buck kept his voice steady. "Phoenix switched to southern routes this year." The man nodded. "Huh, my mistake. Watch container 6. Loose latch. Slam it too hard. It pops." Buck thanked him, but his mind locked on one truth: the man had seen him somewhere and was trying to place him. Meaning, Buck had gone too deep into a place where one recognized face could make him disappear again. This time, for good. He couldn't linger. Buck faked a cargo check, then logged coordinates into a nearby receiver. He nudged the SUV's wheel on the way out, nudging an overhead camera off axis. 1 second, but enough to blur his face from a few frames. Before leaving, he muttered, "No doubt now, this is the hub, and I've found the way in." The SUV left the warehouse at 3:44. No one stopped him. No one asked. In a place like this, if you got in, no one dared question you. That silence was the scariest part. On the drive back, Buck opened Kyle's letter, the first time in 10 years. The paper had yellowed, but the words stayed sharp. The final line stole his breath. "If Kincaid's alive, he's no brother. He sold our lives, and he'll do it again. Until no one's left to tell." Buck folded the letter. Dawn hadn't broken, but everything in him was clear. This was no longer just about a granddaughter. It was a network, an old darkness waking, and a man erased from history would be the last name they'd fear remembering. The morning wind cut like steel needles. Gainesville was still half asleep, but other lights lingered on the southeast edge. Here, Warehouse 17 had just ended its night shift. Not bustling, not loud, just an unnatural silence, the kind that's made, controlled. And that's when Buck knew he couldn't wait any longer. The data was complete: cargo codes, container photos, internal markers, transport routes, all pointed to one entity, Sentinel Logistics, a civilian security firm on the surface, a gateway to an organized human trafficking network behind it. Not a single branch, but a web. If he didn't sever the hub now, they'd vanish with the kids in under 24 hours. Buck opened an offline tablet, displaying his ops map. 3 targets: 1 primary warehouse 17, 2 secondary warehouse 22 in Amarillo and an abandoned logistics hub near Bowie. 3 sites, same transport method, same signal patterns, same route. To expose the system, he had to draw out the head, force Douglas Kincaid into the open, and the network would collapse. 4:12 a.m. the next morning. Buck returned to Warehouse 17. No disguise, no hiding. He wore a faded combat uniform with no name tag, but those who knew him would recognize that walk, that stride. The gate didn't open automatically. Cameras swiveled, lights snapped on, a cold, robotic voice. No deliveries now. Buck held up a transport log. Last chance. Direct order. A pause. Then the gate opened. He didn't drive to the delivery zone. He veered to the technical area. Cooling system controls, camera signal boards, under his jacket, in the left pocket. A small electromagnetic device, not explosive, but enough to jam the system for 12 minutes, that's all. He didn't need more. He attached it to a steel beam by the control panel. Activated it. Lights flickered. The system hummed faintly. A worker rushed over. "What's going on?" Buck didn't answer. He opened his phone, turned on the speaker, and played the recording from the first night. Douglas Kincaid's voice. "Deliver as usual, before 4:30. No people, no machines. And remember, that old man needs to disappear." The sound echoed in the cold warehouse, amid flickering lights and frozen figures. Some recognized the voice, some recognized him. No one spoke, no one moved, only Buck, calmly scanning the room. Then he said, soft but clear, "I'm not here to take back a kid. I'm here to take back a name you erased from history." A man was charged. Buck sidestepped, twisted his wrist, dropped him to the floor. Another pulled a knife. Buck didn't hesitate. Drew a rubber mallet, struck the man's arm. Fast, clean, no wasted motion. Bone snapped like an old clock breaking. A minute later, 2 were down, 3 others fled. Buck didn't chase. He opened his phone. I activated the signal for Container 6, and its GPS coordinates matched the cargo code he'd noted earlier. He reached it, pried the lock. The door swung open. Inside, 3 children, unbound but trembling. A boy, about 11, eyes wild, like he was seeing someone from another world. Buck shed his jacket, draped it over the boy's shoulders. "It's okay. I'm here to take you home." No tears, but his voice caught, like a stone rolling in his chest for 20 years. Tires screeched outside. A black sedan skidded to a stop. The door flew open. A man stepped out, silver hair, tall, brown leather jacket, eyes that never knew regret. Douglas Kincaid. He wasn't surprised, just looked at Buck and gave a faint smile. "Thought you were dead." Buck stood shielding the kids. I thought so too. Then I remembered, you're not dead until there's no one left to save. Kincaid smirked. "You think this takes down the network? This isn't war anymore. It's a global supply chain." Buck nodded. "And every chain has a weak link." I picked the right one. He turned up the speaker. Another recording played. Kincaid's voice. "Wipe his name, make it look like an accident if needed." Kincaid went silent. The smile vanished. Buck said, "Cops aren't coming, but the press is. And this time, I'm not staying quiet. I'll tell it all, from Helmand to this morning." Kincaid drew a pistol, hand steady. But his eyes flickered. Buck didn't step back. "Shoot me like you left Kyle behind without looking back, but if you shoot, you'll prove everything I said is true." Kincaid stood still for 1 second, then lowered the gun, and right then, sirens wailed in the distance. A local news van pulled up with a young reporter. She'd received Buck's recording last night. Camera lights blazed, wind swept through the cold warehouse, and in that harsh glow, Buck walked toward Kincaid, said nothing, just ripped the old FBI badge from his chest, tossed it to the floor, no ceremony, no authority left. Buck faced the camera for the first time in years. No raised hands, no proclamation, just one sentence, low, slow, but sharp as steel forged in war's fire. "I don't need anyone to remember my name. Just don't let this truth be forgotten." The police arrived 10 minutes later. No sirens, no weapons drawn. They didn't swarm like in the movies. Everything unfolded quietly, slowly, almost hesitantly. Because in Warehouse 17, where white light spilled across gray tin roofs and early wind slipped through cold door cracks, this wasn't just a crime scene. It was a line between truth and what they'd been told to not dig too deep into. Buck said nothing more after the cameras shut off. He didn't answer questions. He didn't shy from the light. Let them see it all, every wrinkle, every scar, and his eyes, no longer angry, just weary, from a man who'd carried 10 years of silence, not for fame, not for victory, only to keep a promise. Douglas Kincaid was cuffed, silent, no resistance, no words, no glances. Those who once called him boss now kept their distance. No one spoke, no one asked. They looked at him like a statue fallen from its pedestal, shattered, soundless. When police searched the warehouse, they didn't just find 3 kids. 6 more compartments held personal items, forged papers, children's clothes, and an encrypted data set in an old military format. One only a few still knew how to use, not in modern manuals, but in the missions Buck had quietly walked away from, with eyes that never closed. That night, Buck returned to the truck stop near Sherman, where his old Freightliner waited. Sarah was home safe, sleeping soundly, clutching the blanket's edge, as if letting go would bring the nightmare back. Doctors said the physical trauma wasn't severe, but her mind would need time. Buck didn't ask more. He just sat there, nodded, then pulled a worn-edged paper from his wallet. Kyle's letter. This time, he read every word, with no skips, and at the end, I burned it to ash, nothing left to hold, nothing left to silence. In the letter, Kyle wrote, Kincaid had ordered a retreat despite knowing men were trapped, just to keep casualty stats clean in reports. Kyle knew, but could do nothing. He had no rank, only an order, and a shame no one heard. The final line read, "I didn't die from enemy fire. I died because my own left me behind. If you're alive, tell someone this, even once, so I'm not just a nameless death." Buck had kept that letter for 10 years, unread, unspoken, unburned, because he wasn't ready. But now he'd spoken, before cameras, before people, before the betrayer, and for the one who died. The next day, local TV aired multi-state human trafficking ring busted, linked to former FBI hero. No major networks picked it up, no national papers dug deeper. But the story spread in Gainesville and at truck stops along the highways. The story spread, not as gossip, but in glances. They slowed when they saw an older man in a rig, quietly sipping coffee at dawn, didn't ask, didn't point, but in their hearts they knew that, sometimes, the quietest carry the most. Kincaid didn't plead guilty. He hired lawyers, refused the press, but the recordings, container photos, and delivery logs, they spoke for him. He wasn't just involved, he was the linchpin. Running the system for 7 years, since leaving the FBI for logistics consulting. A clean title. For someone skilled at hiding filth. Buck was asked to testify in court. He declined. He handed all the evidence to the feds, asked for nothing. Said only, "I don't need my name, just make this stop." The lawyer nodded, didn't press. Some don't need spotlights, they just move, the way they came, in the dark, without fanfare. Buck taped Sarah's photo to the dashboard in the truck's cab. Beside it, he added an old black and white photo of 3 soldiers by a Humvee, him, Kyle, Kincaid, but now, Kincaid's face was crossed out in red ink. Not from anger, not from hate, but to remind, not everyone who walks with you is a brother. The Freightliner started. Its engine is low, slow, but steady. He drove out of the truck stop, northbound. A new delivery is waiting. Buck didn't see himself as a hero, didn't think he'd won. He just knew, this time, he hadn't stayed silent, and because of that, Kyle could rest. That night, his truck cut through the highway, under yellow lights blurred by fog and cold wind from the open plains. No one waved, no one called his name, but in his heart, a vow was kept whole. Early morning in Decatur, Texas, thin fog drifted through the trees at the rest stop off westbound US 287, where truckers paused to fuel up before veering toward Oklahoma or looping through Arkansas. Everything started like any other day. Drivers clutched steaming plastic coffee cups, studied route maps, and tuned into traffic reports. No one noticed the silver Freightliner parked quietly in a corner. No one saw the man wiping the windshield with an old rag. And no one knew, just a week ago, he'd brought down a human trafficking network because he didn't tell, and he didn't let anyone tell him. Buck stood there, paper coffee cup in hand, eyes tracing the horizon, where the sun slowly rose from low hills. His face showed no triumph or etched pain in the thin, golden light. Just stillness, like a deep lake after a fierce wind. Sarah was home safe. She was still startled in her dreams, but each morning she asked, "Where's Grandpa?" And when her mother softly answered, "He's out hauling," she'd drift back to sleep. She didn't recall what happened, couldn't picture the faces of those who'd caged her, but she remembered his arms, his low voice. "It's okay, I'm here," those words. A small talisman, guiding her through the dark without needing to understand it all. The feds offered a medal. Buck declined. They invited him to a press conference in Austin. He declined. They suggested a stipend for a citizen combating interstate crime. He refused, sent back one line via email. Justice doesn't need payment. It needs to keep promises. No one replied because none was needed. In the cab, Buck taped Sarah's photo back to the dash beside an old black and white of him and Kyle on their last mission. No red marks crossing out faces, no anger left. Just a photo looked at again, and accepted. He hung the faded AFSOC tag on the rearview mirror, not for show, but to remind. There was a time he lived not for himself, but for those whose names no one recalls, and that kept him moving, not for medals, not for the past, but for a vow, one he'd never let slip from his hands. That afternoon, a 14-year-old boy walked through the lot at a truck stop near the Arkansas border. One of the 3 kids was saved from the container. He stopped, didn't speak. I just looked at Buck from afar, eyes wet, and then raised a hand in salute. Buck didn't approach, didn't ask his name, just placed a hand on his chest, where the military tag hung beneath his jacket. No one recorded that moment. No camera caught those eyes, but those nearby would never forget. Because in Buck's slight nod, there was something old, profound, like a keeper of fire, knowing when to rise and when to let go. Buck kept driving. No one knew where he'd go, no shared maps, no GPS left on, just routine brew coffee at dawn, wipe the windshield, check tires, roll out. Each day, a new route. But wherever he went, a small note stayed on the dash. No one gets left behind. Ever. Below are just 2 letters, W, his initials, once erased from every official record, and maybe that's the last true thing left in a world forgetting gratitude. A man who didn't need his name remembered, but wouldn't let anyone scorn what he'd held. Some pass through our lives like a wind, silent, nameless, no medals, but they're the ones who keep this world from drifting too far from what's right. Not for glory, not to be remembered, they just live and keep their word. If this story touched you, leave a comment, even a few words. It's a way to remind ourselves. Genuine kindness often speaks softly. It's in actions, quiet, unseen. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to join more stories about people who seem ordinary, but live extraordinary lives. If you think someone needs this story, share the video. Maybe they need a reminder too, that this world still has those who keep their promises to the end. See you in another story, another person, another flame, still burning quietly amid life's rush.